On Friday, they fired me. On Monday, their company lost a $40 million contract. They thought they could erase me with a single signature, a single cold sentence during that sterile meeting. But what they did not know was that the signature they ignored, the one they had let slip past their frantic eyes, still bore my name, still carried my control. I walked out of that building with an empty badge, a cardboard box filled with the meaningless leftovers of 3 years, a coffee mug, a torn notebook, a broken pen, and the kind of quiet rage that does not scream, does not burn fast, but instead seeps deep, cold, deliberate, patient. They thought they were clever. They thought cutting costs meant cutting me. They thought efficiency meant betrayal. And when Monday arrived and the auditors knocked on their door and the numbers bled red across their screens, I was already awake, coffee in hand, watching the first domino fall. The office had always smelled like burnt coffee and fresh plastic, the kind of environment where people smiled without their eyes, and every corridor hummed with fluorescent lights and whispered calculations of quarterly targets. I was a systems architect, not the kind that builds bridges or towers, but the kind that builds invisible structures, digital frameworks that keep the blood of their corporation pumping. Security, compliance, licenses, the invisible walls that hold their empire together. 3 years of my life went into those walls. 3 years of skipped weekends, late nights, countless emails marked urgent, countless promises that the next quarter would bring recognition, a bonus, a title, something more than a polite handshake. Andrew, that was my name in the corridors, in the signed memos, in the brief applause when a project passed without disaster. Andrew, the reliable one. Andrew, the one who documented everything. Andrew, the one they called a perfectionist, with a smile and a whisper that it was not always meant as a compliment. The Friday they fired me, the sky outside was a flat sheet of winter gray. I had arrived early, as always, coffee lukewarm, inbox already overflowing. The message came at 9:22 a.m. from HR. A meeting in conference room 3, immediate attendance required. There was no subject line of courtesy, no explanation, just a calendar block shaped like a blade. Inside the room, the new CTO, a man with teeth too white for the season, a woman from HR with a folder she clutched like a shield, and a silent assistant who kept glancing at the clock. They told me about restructuring, about optimization, about my role being redundant. The words felt like rubber bullets bouncing off the armor I had been building for months. I asked about the project, the license renewal, the pending audit next week. The CTO smiled as though I had asked about the weather. "It's handled," he said. "We have everything we need." Everything except the signature they had forgotten. Everything except the clause in the contract they had never truly read. Everything except me. I signed their exit forms with a steady hand. I handed over my badge. They asked for my laptop, my access card, my office key. I gave them all three, but I kept the thing they never saw because it was never in my drawer. It was in the foundation of their compliance, the contract between their system and my small independent company, the one they used as a proxy to speed up certification 2 years ago. They had never canceled it. They had never transferred the license. Legally, it was still mine. Legally, they were tenants in my digital house. I left that building not as a beggar, not as a defeated man, but as a witness to their arrogance. Outside, the wind cut through my coat, and the city moved on without knowing a quiet storm had begun. Over the weekend, I watched them from a distance. Social media posts of office celebrations, a memo about cost reduction achieved, a photograph of the CTO shaking hands with a client representative under a banner that promised innovation and reliability. I sipped my coffee, read the lines between their smiles, and opened my private inbox where an automated notification waited. License renewal pending, requires confirmation by Monday noon, sent to the legal contact. My name, my address, my signature. That was when the quiet rage turned into something else. Not an outburst, not a scream, a plan. I spent the rest of Saturday cleaning my apartment, not because I needed cleanliness, but because I needed order. the kind of order that prepares a mind for what comes next. Sunday, I walked by the river, watched the water carry broken leaves, and thought about the years I had given them, the nights they had taken without asking, the promises they had broken with a smile. They thought betrayal was just business. I decided to teach them the true cost of cutting corners. Monday morning, 8:30 a.m., my phone buzzed with the same automated reminder. I brewed another coffee, darker this time, sat by the window and waited for the clock to turn. At 9, the auditors arrived at their headquarters. At 9:15, the CTO's assistant called my personal number. At 9:25, I sent them the first email. Polite, formal, a simple note reminding them that the license they needed to pass the audit was bound by a contract still active under my name, pending renewal, pending compliance with outstanding issues I had documented, sent, and archived. There was silence on the other end for a minute that felt like a year. They thought I would beg to come back. They thought I would fear lawyers, threats, corporate language heavy with disclaimers. But they had underestimated the power of a man who documented everything, who saved every email, who read every clause while they scrolled headlines. The contract was my shield. The law, this time, was on my side. By noon, panic had started to spread in their corridors. By 2 p.m., a senior manager emailed me directly, offering a quick settlement. By 4, the CTO himself called, voice dripping with forced calm, asking me to do the right thing for the team. The same team that had watched me pack my things in silence. I said I would consider it. If they acknowledged the outstanding compliance gaps, if they signed the correction forms, if they paid the overdue invoices my small company had sent 6 months ago, and they had conveniently ignored. He hung up without an answer. That night, I slept well for the first time in months. The next day, Tuesday, the audit failed. Wednesday, their client announced a temporary suspension of the contract pending resolution of legal liabilities. Thursday, the board of directors requested a full report of the incident. By Friday, the CTO was no longer in the building. And me, I was still on the outside, watching, waiting, building something new from the ruins they had tried to bury me under. I never wanted to destroy them. I wanted them to understand. But when arrogance meets silence, silence always wins. I walked into their office a week later, not as an employee, but as a consultant hired by the board to rebuild what had been broken. The same corridors, the same faces, now avoiding my gaze. They had thought cutting me out would save them. In the end, cutting me out only proved how fragile their empire really was. I was not there for revenge. I was there for control. Because control, when taken quietly, never feels like vengeance to those who watch it happen. It feels like inevitability. And as I signed the new agreement, with the board's seal and my name above theirs, I realized something. Empires rarely fall with a bang. Most of the time, they fall with a missing signature. Silence arrived faster than I expected. The corridors I once walked daily now echoed with emptiness, whispers fatting behind closed doors, computers humming with work they no longer knew how to manage. People glanced at me from behind monitors, uncertain whether I had returned or was simply a shadow haunting them. The audit had collapsed, clients had paused projects, and management scrambled desperately, searching for solutions I already had in hand. I observed quietly, noting their every error, every overlooked detail, every hint of panic they believed invisible. I began with documentation. Years of emails, meeting notes, compliance reports, minor discrepancies filed in archives nobody ever read, reminders sent to people who never responded. Each piece was a thread in the web they had constructed without realizing someone had traced every knot. I organized them methodically, labeling, cross-referencing, building a map of weaknesses hidden beneath layers of bureaucracy. Each folder I opened was a small thrill, a silent victory over arrogance. Every error they had committed would become a lever I could pull. Calls began coming almost immediately. Former colleagues reached out cautiously, testing waters, sending veiled questions about whether I had moved on, whether bitterness consumed me, whether I intended retaliation. I ignored them. Patience is a weapon sharper than any email or memo. The board, lawyers, executives, they had underestimated what meticulous silence can achieve. I observed, letting the storm rage around me, letting them believe they were still in control. A letter arrived via courier marked confidential. Inside, a formal request from the board asked me to attend a consultation regarding the company's recovery. No apology, no admission of negligence, just corporate language polished to perfection. I placed it on my desk alongside unpaid invoices ignored for months. I read, I noted, I smiled faintly. They had no idea how little power they truly held. Night walks became routine. I wandered city streets, letting traffic noise fill ears, eyes scanning, mind calculating. Sleep came in short intervals, punctuated by plans forming faster than the days themselves. I reviewed their contracts, license agreements, internal memos, any document with a signature, date, or clause that could be leveraged. One mistake overlooked for convenience could collapse everything. I had kept meticulous records, and the contract that mattered most, the one still under my company's name, remained active. Their assumption that dismissal equaled control was naive. The first attempt to reach me came via email from the former CTO, arrogance now slightly tinged with desperation. He spoke of teamwork, collaboration, avoiding disruption. I read, set aside, replied to none. Words meant nothing without action. Every document I retained, every log file saved, every correspondence archived became potential leverage. I did not need threats, confrontation, or loud arguments. They had built their own cage. I merely held the key. Intermediaries arrived. Former colleagues, friends, people who believed persuasion could alter outcomes. They came with coffee, reassurances, veiled warnings, casual requests. I invited them in, poured coffee, listened carefully. They spoke of layoffs, frozen projects, employees anxious about stability. I asked them whether anyone had worried when my own role was discarded, when my presence was considered redundant despite years of labor. Conversations ended abruptly, intermediaries leaving with empty cups, questions unanswered. Doubt sometimes crept into nights. Lying awake, staring at ceilings, I questioned whether my purpose remained constructive or had become obsession. I reminded myself of facts, overlooked deadlines, falsified checklists, ignored warnings. My patience was not cruelty. It was justice unfolding in quiet increments. Every misstep they had taken, every corner cut, every procedure ignored now formed a foundation for precise, controlled reclamation. Then a call from the board, a voice calm, deliberate, older than any executive I had faced. No accusations, no bargaining, only inquiry into conditions necessary to restore compliance and security. The question was simple: what would it take to fix everything? I answered honestly, specifying that gaps must be corrected, obligations met, and leadership responsible for prior failures removed. A pause followed, acknowledgement of understanding. The call ended. Monday brought an invitation. Lead the recovery project with full authority over audits, restructuring, negotiations. Title absent, power present. I accepted, not for reward, not for pride, but because the architecture I had built was mine. Without proper oversight, their empire would crumble. I intended to restore it on my terms. Entering the building again, the air smelled differently, fear mingled with faint attempts at normalcy. Faces turned, whispers ceased mid-sentence. I walked directly to the boardroom where interim managers, nervous HR representatives, and 2 lawyers awaited. I outlined a 3-phase restoration: immediate compliance cleanup, license renewal, full restructuring of security systems. Each recommendation precise, timed, enforceable. The room shifted, tension palpable, yet respect emerging. Emails arrived daily. Accusations from the former CTO, threats veiled in corporate jargon. I forwarded each to the board without comment. By Thursday, the CTO's name vanished from internal directories. Mistakes became clearer: hidden debts, falsified expense reports, contracts unsigned or ignored. Their empire had been fragile before my absence. I had merely clarified reality. Walking city streets at night, I noticed acknowledgement from strangers and former colleagues. They sensed something shifted, subtle but undeniable. My small independent company, once peripheral, became central to survival. Investors called, lawyers prepared new contracts, executives sought guidance. My steps measured, words chosen with care, decisions executed methodically. Rooftop terrace of the office became my observation point. Power arrived not with fanfare but as keys in pockets, signatures, authority to enforce accountability. Arrogance had been their undoing, silence and patience mine. They had dismissed me for expedience, attempting to cut costs and remove a perceived obstacle. Now they relied on my expertise, my methodical rebuilding, my ability to secure stability. I did not celebrate. Not yet. Real victory manifests in structure restored, in order reestablished, in foundation solidified. Corporate empire is fragile, but it can endure under careful hands. I had begun, silently, methodically, not for revenge, but because the architecture demanded stewardship. Every overlooked error became evidence. Every mismanaged process became an opportunity to implement correction. Every hesitation by leadership reinforced my authority. The board recognized my influence subtly, assigning critical decisions, entrusting compliance oversight, allowing me to restructure departments, revise protocols, renegotiate contracts. Employees who had feared my presence now observed my methods with cautious admiration. I moved through corridors with calm efficiency, decisions implemented quietly, without dramatics, yet felt with unmistakable impact. Evenings remained my time for reflection, reviewing files, verifying audits, confirming that systems once flawed now aligned with policy. Every adjustment documented, every compliance gap corrected. By midweek, leadership began consulting me directly on decisions, acknowledging the expertise they had once dismissed. Emails, once ignored, now returned promptly. Meetings, once devoid of attention, now focused entirely on implementation of protocols I established. The subtlety of control became apparent. Power is most effective when invisible. Influence achieved without confrontation leaves no scars, demands no apology, yet shapes outcomes decisively. I remained a silent architect, orchestrating recovery, correcting failures, preparing company for sustainable operation under ethical, legal, effective management. Threats continued but diminished. Attempts at intimidation, accusations of sabotage veiled corporate threats, irrelevant once evidence documented, contracts validated, audits confirmed. My authority solidified not by title alone, but by mastery of systems, comprehension of oversight, and patient enforcement of responsibility. Clients observed stability returning, projects resumed. Contractors and vendors regained confidence. Board meetings no longer chaotic but structured, responsive. Each phase of restoration completed without public spectacle, reinforcing perception of competence, diminishing lingering resistance. Even in personal interactions, my approach remained calm. Former colleagues approached, testing boundaries, seeking reassurance or attempting influence. I engaged selectively, offering guidance, correcting errors, reinforcing policies. Influence extended through methodical presence, not dramatic confrontation. Each decision calculated, ensuring long-term compliance, security, operational stability. Legal and financial frameworks reconstructed to ensure obligations met, risks mitigated, licenses renewed, contracts secured. Every detail verified, every process documented, every misstep accounted for. Organization strengthened by meticulous corrections, leadership informed by factual evidence, employees supported through structured guidance. Recognition emerged subtly, invitations to advise on strategic decisions, authority over departmental restructuring, oversight of critical audits. I moved within company not as outsider but as essential architect of stability. My prior absence now contextualized as necessary for assessment, my return as restoration. Reflection on prior dismissal remained private. Motivation rooted in precision, responsibility, ethical management, rather than vengeance. Arrogance and oversight by former leadership provided opportunity, but not justification for harm. Restoration executed with focus on accuracy, stability, compliance. Daily routines established. Auditing operations, verifying compliance, mentoring managers, reviewing protocols, ensuring alignment with strategic objectives. Organization gradually stabilized. Operations normalized, trust rebuilt. Authority exercised methodically, visibly absent of dramatics, subtly reinforcing accountability. Through careful planning, patient execution, systematic observation, the company evolved from chaotic instability to controlled functionality. Decisions previously ignored now implemented, errors corrected, leadership guided by structured oversight. Systems secured, licenses active, audits passed, contracts validated. Every interaction with remaining executives reinforced understanding. Authority now tied to competence, oversight, documentation, accountability. Resistance dissipated, collaboration increased, operational performance improved. Impact of meticulous intervention apparent in restored stability, increased efficiency, strengthened compliance. By conclusion of period, company operationally restored, leadership stabilized, processes validated, systems secure, licenses active, contracts enforceable, employees aligned, stakeholders confident. Authority exercised effectively, influence established without confrontation, restoration achieved without public spectacle. I did not celebrate. Satisfaction remained internal, derived from completion of restoration, validation of oversight, assurance of compliance, establishment of order. Silence prevailed over chaos. Methodical execution prevailed over impulsive reaction. Observation prevailed over arrogance. Control achieved subtly, effectively, sustainably. Weeks turned into months, yet every step I took remained deliberate, measured, unseen, yet irreversible. The remnants of previous management had dwindled under their own indecision, errors compounding like cracks in a facade. My presence became the pivot point for stability. Employees began to look to me for guidance, legal teams sought approval, clients waited on my instructions. Power was no longer theoretical. It had manifested in results, in compliance, in renewed contracts, in restored trust. I walked through the office, noticing subtle shifts in behavior, managers pausing before making decisions, double-checking protocols I had reinforced, employees no longer taking shortcuts. Every corner of the company reflected my influence. The systems I had quietly rebuilt ensured accountability, transparency, efficiency. What had been fragile now stood resilient. The company was no longer dependent on luck or negligence. It was bound to methodical oversight, something I had enforced with quiet precision. Opportunities arose naturally. Investors, previously wary, now approached with proposals contingent on my guidance. Board members who had once dismissed me as redundant now deferred to my judgment, seeking my analysis before votes. Clients returned, hesitant at first, now confident. The world outside the glass walls recognized the rebirth, unaware of the subtle orchestration that had made it possible. I implemented final restructuring, leadership changes to remove persistent incompetence, departmental realignment to optimize workflow, auditing systems fully automated and transparent. Decisions previously delayed or ignored now executed promptly. Errors that could have destabilized operations were corrected before manifesting. Authority had shifted completely, quietly, without confrontation. Those who remained understood I was not to be bypassed. Financially, the company stabilized and exceeded expectations. Budgets, once hemorrhaging due to mismanagement, now balanced precisely, with resources allocated efficiently. Contracts renegotiated, licenses secured, compliance verified. Profits increased steadily, reflecting the effect of structured oversight. My name appeared less frequently publicly, yet internally it carried undeniable weight. Influence had replaced title. Control had replaced pretense. The former CTO attempted one last move, a memorandum questioning my authority, implying overreach. I forwarded it to the board alongside my meticulous documentation, highlighting mismanagement, errors, and risk mitigation plans I had executed. The response was swift. He was removed, his attempts at subversion dissolved by clarity and evidence. My decisions now guided corporate policy, shaping outcomes with precision. Employees, initially wary, became allies. Trust developed as results manifested consistently. I mentored mid-level managers, empowered teams, established accountability structures that ensured operations continued without my constant presence, yet could not succeed without adherence to standards I had set. The company's backbone was reinforced, both human and procedural. The board formalized my position: full executive authority, direct oversight over departments, ultimate responsibility for strategic decisions. I accepted, not for title alone, but to ensure continuity of standards, to protect the integrity of systems I had rebuilt. Authority cemented through competence, not intimidation. Influence cemented through methodical, documented action. By the end of the year, the company had not only recovered, but expanded. New projects launched successfully. Client retention reached unprecedented levels. Previously dormant opportunities activated. Stability now permanent, growth intentional, reputation restored. The empire that once trembled under mismanagement now thrived under oversight I had established. Even then, I maintained patience. Victory does not announce itself with fanfare. It manifests quietly, through consistent results, through control over outcomes, through undeniable evidence of competency. I continued to walk corridors, review audits, verify compliance, ensure processes function seamlessly. Employees respected authority established through integrity, not fear. Confidence radiated outward from operational efficiency. Months later, during a board meeting reviewing annual performance, I presented comprehensive results: restored financial stability, compliance secured, operational efficiency achieved, growth strategies implemented. Board members expressed formal acknowledgement, executives deferred to judgment, clients affirmed renewed contracts. Recognition was implicit, respect established. Influence had become irreversible. Outside the office, life returned to personal rhythm, yet the satisfaction remained internal. Each decision reinforced stability, each correction prevented collapse, each strategic initiative strengthened resilience. Power had been attained without spectacle, secured without chaos, exercised without need for vindictiveness. The company, once fragile, now relied on methodical structures, strategic foresight, and adherence to principles I had enforced. Reflection became habitual. I considered past arrogance by former leadership, their dismissive attitudes, their short-sighted decisions. Mistakes, once threatening collapse, now served as lessons embedded within operational procedures, ensuring recurrence impossible. The empire had been reborn, stronger, more resilient, immune to same errors that had once imperiled it. Even as new challenges arose, the foundation remained solid. I anticipated risks, preempted failures, established contingencies. Authority now absolute, influence sustained by competence. Those who remained loyal or capable flourished, those incompetent or disruptive removed. Balance restored, stability maintained, growth ongoing. Looking from the executive office, I observed the city below, the same streets once walked with quiet contemplation. Achievements were private, subtle, tangible only through restored systems, recovered reputation, functional operations. Control, exercised with precision, created outcomes impervious to casual interference, immune to mismanagement, resistant to chaos. Victory had arrived not through revenge, confrontation, or spectacle, but through patience, preparation, meticulous action, and unwavering focus. Empire restored, authority solidified, operations stabilized, reputation repaired, influence permanent. I had rebuilt, I had reclaimed, I had ensured continuity. The company now thrived under oversight I had quietly installed. Employees trusted, board relied, clients returned, systems reinforced. Arrogance once present now replaced by methodical respect. Silence had yielded power. Observation had yielded control. Patience had yielded authority. And so, in the calm of executive responsibility, I recognized the truth. Empires do not fall in chaos alone. They collapse under negligence, recover under foresight, endure under meticulous stewardship. I had been that steward. I had been both witness and architect. The company, once fractured, now whole. The foundation, once ignored, now unshakable. My influence, once questioned, now undeniable. The rebirth complete.